An interesting question asked the other day for the umpteenth time. How many people have asked you maybe, well, what's unity? What is unity? It seems to defy description, you know. It's like, and we've been doing a lot of work. In fact, we're going to be doing more work in that field. I think in the professional world, in the industrial world, it's called paying attention to your branding. I would ask Pam, is that right? The branding idea is to build an identity? Yeah. And so what is our identity? And, you know, I kind of would draw blanks. And it's not so much, I'm discovering as I play with this a lot, it's not so much in determining what we are as much as it's determining what we're not, in juxtaposition to what the typical idea about a religion is. And there's a lot of things that don't happen here that happen in other churches. And there's a lot of things that do happen here that don't happen in other churches, not the least of which is do whack-a-diddle-diddle-dum-dee-dee, which is right in keeping with Glenn's philosophy of having fun with it. But I was trying to come up with something that would maybe give people a handle, just a little handle of what they might not so much expect, but just to get a feel for the difference, that what makes unity a unique exploration of the spiritual domain. And something came up for me as a result of driving the other day. I was driving out to a wedding, and I passed a street sign on a church. It was out in front of a church in one of these marquee things. And it said, "Words won't break bones, but they can break hearts." Now, what's your first kind of flashing inclination on seeing that? Words won't break bones, but they can break hearts. And I was out in front of a church, and that church is announcing that's a piece of their philosophy, that words can break your heart. Now, does that feel like something you would encounter here, that idea? The notion that words can break your hearts? If you're still believing that, I want you to hit me in the back of the head with a 2-iron, okay? Words don't break hearts. Words are just words. To move your emotional nature from one of zippity-doo-dah to one of non-celebratory experience with our life here. There's a certain thing that goes on a lot with us that turns the Garden of Eden into a rock and a hard place. And one of the most profound things we can do to enter into a state of non-grace is to fall into that trap of believing that what somebody says or does is responsible for what I'm feeling in the moment. Because the moment we do that, the moment we slip into that fantasy, we are helpless to do anything about it ourselves. Then we are dependent on that person changing their behavior, changing their mode of being with us for our salvation. Can you see that? Can you hear that a little bit? And that's something that goes on. And most of the that would be people that are really profoundly promoting what they call the ethical behavior. And it's important we don't misunderstand this. Of course, we support ethical behavior. People say, well, it sounds like unity doesn't believe in the 10 Commandments. So of course we believe in the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not, don't kill, don't steal, don't hurt, don't do this, don't do that. But that's just a start. I look at the 10 Commandments as little baby steps on the road to spiritual salvation. Okay, don't kill. Well, duh. You know? Okay, but it seems like as a nation, we haven't really embraced that as part of the, the ongoing energy that we operate out of. Killing is fine. We decide in certain circumstances, we manufacture those, and all the time, I don't see anywhere in the 10 Commandments where it says, thou shalt not kill except in cases. There's absolutely none of that there. So it says, don't kill, but that's just a start. Then you get into some of the more explicit and some of the more mystical aspects of the spiritual journey. You encounter people like Jesus, who says things like, if someone injures you, if you upset yourself over somebody, if they say something mean and cruel and they lie about you, don't kill them. Don't be angry with them. Don't seek revenge for them. Do what? Have compassion for them. Have compassion for their stuckness. Return good for evil, for they're spiritually unconscious, and that's what evil means in my mentality. To do an evil work is to do a work that is not spiritually informed. Okay? And the outcome of that is the evil that comes out of that. So this idea of branding unity came out of that encounter with that sign. It says, well, what is unity? Well, it's not so much, and I invite you to maybe explore this the next time somebody asks you that. It's not so much what it is, but what it isn't. And you would not see a sign like that out in front of a Unity Church because we know darn well that words don't break hearts. That hearts break over words. But the owner of the heart is the active ingredient in this. The owner of the heart is the one that determines whether the word is going to be a breaking force or a force calling out compassion. And we're slowly learning that we're not going to ever be placed in any kind of situation that calls for that kind of understanding and wisdom unless we have come to a place in our lives and our evolution, spiritually speaking, where we have the spiritual chutzpah to respond to that. Remember we talked about here a few weeks ago about being up to encounter the magnitude of the pain that's given to us to accommodate, and that's all that comes out of. A lot of pain on the part of people who are operating out of ignorance. So that's one thing you might answer. Well, what is unity? Well, it is this and it is that, but you might call it a practical Christianity, and indeed it is in a positive sense, but what it isn't is a set of ideals that ever gives away the empowerment of the individual to choose in any moment exactly how they're going to respond to whatever's happening out here in the external world. And the encouragement is to respond to that with authentic spiritual wisdom. A wisdom. When you find out that someone is criticizing you, for example, you're not going to go run back in the corner and suck your thumb. You won't do that anymore. You'll go, here I am again in the school of life with a child of God who's sharing something with me that seems true and necessary for him in the moment. Can you hear that a little bit? This is the all-purpose response to whatever comes down in your life when you find yourself encountering another human being that's got a different point of view from yours regarding an incident that you're part of at that moment. This happens in churches a lot. How many have ever been in a church where you were experiencing some pretty significant internecine warfare going on between different groups of people in the church? I mean, it's my best understanding, and all the Baptist ministers that I've ever encountered have told me, well, that's how the Baptist movement grew so large. There were just lots of little wars, and I remember the wonderful story about the guy that was on a deserted island, and he lived there by himself. He was undiscovered for years and years and years and years, and finally some people came by and noticed him, and they stopped by, and he said, I've been shipwrecked here for probably 15 years now, maybe 20 years. I've just lost track of time. And the man looked around, and there was just all this development had gone on. The guy had been busy. He built all kinds of buildings and stuff. He had a little drugstore just to remind him of home. And he had a church, and there was another church down at the end of the street. So there's only one of you. Why'd you build two churches? He said, well, that's a church I don't go to. So that's a branding. That's a branding. That's a church I don't go to. And a unity, you never, I say never, hardly ever, going to hear any suggestion that what's going on inside me in terms of my feeling essence is the result of something somebody else did. I do trust That we'll keep working at that and do due diligence on any tendency we might have to still blame my emotional context on the activity of anything out here. That's all a do-it-to-ourself proposition. And it's incredibly empowering to start operating from that point of view. Because then, if you want to do something about a feeling in here that's not simpatico with the creation's feelings of, serenity and peace and lightheartedness and loving kindness, if it's something other than that, then I can do something about it. I don't have to wait until you get your act together. And you see the futility of that? Of continuing to move through life blaming what's going on inside you in terms of your feeling essence on something someone else is doing or not doing. You're in absolute bondage to them making a change in their lives. What's the chances of that? Somewhere between spit and nothing. Okay, darlings? Just keep the Jesus teaching in mind there. He would say, what is it you do when you love only those who love you? No big deal. Anybody can do that. He said, love those who would persecute you. Love them. Pray for those who would carry you away to do harm to you. Return good for evil. Well, there you go. And how do you do that? You take them out of your contemplation of evil. They don't exist anymore in terms of causal agent. If you can live with that one, getting very clear about what the causal agent is in any moment relative to what's going on inside you, in the moment you feel that feeling nature go from zippity-doo-dah to something else, what am I doing to create this? What am I doing? What am I forgetting that's resulting in this shift in my emotional nature from my natural state of peace and serenity? That's the final piece on this. You ever wonder, you were created in the image and likeness of peace and serenity as your natural state's contentment, Buddha called the greatest gift. That's your natural state. Any state other than that is something that I've derived out of spiritually uninformed thinking. Can you handle that? And it's no fun. It's not a lot of zippity-doo-dah time, but I'll tell you, spend some time, invest your time in coming to understand deeply the nature of all your confusions, your inner hostilities and frustrations and agitations, coming to understand how this up here creates that. It's exactly what Jesus was speaking to when he talked about being thrown into prison. Remember? You should be cast into prison and you should not come out until the last farthing has been extracted from you. Yeah. So enjoy your farthings. Keep them in your pockets, okay? Any questions? Any great commentary?
I'd like to find out if you're a fly on the wall at my house.
Thank you, Betsy. This is a very common understanding, and out of this you can come to appreciate the universality of our experiences. Maybe the individual details are different, but the grand idea that's bringing this up is identical in all our class. I can remember when I had my first Unity experience like this with Jim Heinekamp in the Unity in Fort Lauderdale in about 72. I was in the used car business, and we did some things that some people might consider nefarious. Let's just say we were promoting sales. And the karmic thing was explained to me one day. That's when I started thinking about that a little bit. But it seemed like every Sunday I showed up, Jim was speaking directly to something I'd been dealing with that week. And I asked him one day if that was the case. You got somebody following me around for sermon and providing you material for your talks. And he laughed. He said, no, it's nothing like that. It's just that. And then he said the words that probably have more influence than anything I've ever encountered to bring me to this place today. He said, no, it's not that. It's not like anybody's following you around. It's just that there is a set of principles that governs the quality of our emotional experience. And if we understand those principles and abide by them with a lot of commitment and dedication, life will go along real smooth for us in an emotional context. But if either through ignorance or willfulness we continue to violate these principles, then life is ecstasy and agony. Ecstasy and agony. And that's exactly how mine has been. When you win, you're hot, and when you lose, you're not. And that was life-changing. And that was principles that govern the quality of my emotional experience. And that's another branding idea for unity. We study the principles that govern the quality of your emotional experience. Okay? Tell that to people when they ask you. Because I can guarantee you they're going to go, what? Because they've never heard, lay up not for yourself treasure on earth, taught as a principle that governs the quality of your emotional experience. Okay? Write that down, Pam. We'll get that in the deal. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate you being here.